Rather than doing a normal update video where I tell you every single thing that happened in this update and my general thoughts on them, I decided to split things into parts because this update is way too huge and actually interesting to summarize in just one video. On Charles specifically, I have a lot to say because he's one of the characters I've had the most fun with in JJS, like, ever, and despite him being fairly simple to pick up with a low skill floor, he also heavily rewards you for more in-depth knowledge of the game, mainly when it comes to being able to use that knowledge to read your opponent to land your moves. Pretty much every single move he has benefits from knowing how other characters play so that you can read them, which really fits for how Charles is in JJK, despite how irrelevant of a character he is in the actual story. This video is not about the updates, it's about Charles, his moveset, how to use each of the moves, my general thoughts on his design, and why I really like it, and an evaluation of how strong he is compared to other characters in the game. Before we start though, consider subscribing since it helps me continue to make content, and now, let's talk about Charles. Charles by default has 85 HP, which makes him a lot squishier than other characters. What he has to make up for this health decrease is a fairly consistent damage output with simple combos that give me flashbacks to pre-rework Hikari, incredibly good survivability with a counter that can be spammed infinitely as long as it's not missed, and solid tools for winning neutral, whether that be winning an M1 trade through countering predicted hits, or getting some free damage off the insanity that is Sacrilege. As for his moves, let's talk about that. Charles' special is one of the weirdest ones in the entire game. That's not to say it's bad, it's an insanely strong special if you use it correctly, but it is a very unintuitive one that compared to other specials, impacts the fight a lot more indirectly. The way Foresight works is that you press R while your cursor is on somebody to mark them. This initial mark has decently high range and can't be blocked, so activating the mark is practically guaranteed. There is of course some startup, which means that you can get punished if the opponent reads you, but it's not too hard to just keep your distance and then mark them at a distance where you can't get punished for it, so that startup tends to not mean much, especially since you can just use it off of a ragdoll. Once you mark someone, you can press R on them again, which will force them to dash, with a shadow being shown that indicates which direction the opponent is dashing in. The direction they dash in depends on some factors. If you are behind your opponent, to their left, or to their right, they will dash towards you in that respective direction. However, if you are in front of the opponent, it will coin flip between a left and a right dash since you can't force a forward dash. This dash does consume the opponent's side dash, but it does not require the opponent to have their side dash off cooldown in order for you to activate the special. This force dash also does not stun them at all. The special will not activate if the opponent is unable to dash as well, meaning that the special cannot activate on blocking or stunned opponents. In terms of how to use it, the easiest way is to just use it to mess with your opponent's head by flinging them around, which can make it harder for them to attack you. I generally dislike using it for this purpose, because if your opponent doesn't know what they're doing, it's also a lot harder for you to tell what they're doing, but it is at the same time harder for them to play offensively when they're not only being pushed in a random direction, but also losing their side dash when that happens. Another good use for it is helping you land moves, for example, Sacrilege. If you force your opponent to dash for a special, then they won't have their side dash to dodge Sacrilege, and you can pretty much just use the special under Shadow for what is a free hit. You can also take advantage of the opponent being placed in a certain spot by trying to side dash that spot and M1 them, sort of like forcing the opponent to side dash into you, though this is incredibly inconsistent because of the random nature of how the side dash works. And can even hurt you if the opponent is smart because they aren't stunned, just forced to move a bit. Finally, stealing your opponent's side dash pretty much means that they only have blocking and attacking as the ways to defend against your attacks, not counting using a forward dash. So, by using a special, you can limit their options when it comes to dealing with your attacks. I already kinda said this when talking about how you can use it to confirm Sacrilege, but something like a forward dash block bypass becomes a lot easier to land when your opponent has to try and block it instead of doing something more consistent like side dashing to dodge it. Unfortunately, you won't always be able to do this, since his special can sometimes send the opponent to a place where none of your moves can hit them, and you can also become predictable if they see that you're always doing a forward or side dash after you use your special. But if you get lucky and the opportunity presents itself, it is something you can use as long as the opponent doesn't block whatever follow-up attack you choose. The reason I'm not advocating for using it as a combo starter pull, where you bring your opponent to you, is because any person who's even somewhat competent at the game, or is an Xbox player with lock-on, will never not be facing you. At least, not long enough for you to get more value out of the special than you would out of just attacking their back. Tracking people's position in JJS is very easy, to the point that you will never be in a situation where you can pull someone towards you. And 99.9% of the time, you'll be using the coin flip variant of the special, where it's either to the left or right. Charles' special is difficult to use, and unlike stuff like Megumi's Shadow, where you can boil it down to speed boost, or Akari's where it's just melee counter, a forced side dash is not at all straightforward. The tips I've said above are more guidelines that'll point you in the right direction with using it, but most of the time, using your special isn't going to get you anything because of the RNG nature of it. I'd still consider it a good special, and I hesitate to call it weak, but it is by no means busted, and most of the time you aren't going to feel its effects. Moving on to the first move, Despair, it's a pretty standard barrage. Starts with a flurry of stabs before ending with a block bypassing hit, which ragdolls the opponent and sends them away. In terms of combo potential, the move is incredibly simple. If your opponent has ragdoll cancel, use it after 3 M1s, and it's true. If they don't, you can fit an extra M1 in since the move does hit ragdoll. Any 4th M1 can confirm into this move, which mainly matters if you're doing stuff like down slamming turtling opponents, since you can use this move to turn what would just be 1 M1 into a lot more damage. Unfortunately, none of Charles' other moves really combo well with it. I've gotten away with using a side dash into Despair after Sacrilege, but it certainly isn't true, and the stun isn't long enough for you to fit in an extra down slam. It does however confirm into Sacrilege, as long as the opponent has no ragdoll cancel, but for the most part, Despair is a combo ender out of M1s. If you're using it in neutral, it can work really well as a way to win M1 trades, catch someone out of a forward dash, or kinda just catch someone out of any dash really. It's a big hitbox that lasts for a long time, which makes it very easy to land the initial hits. Just make sure you're actually landing it, because it's easy to punish off of block by unblocking and M1ing, and not too hard to punish off a complete whiff either. You'll mostly use this move after 3 M1s for damage though. Shut Up is a little bit more interesting, in that it's both a bread and butter combo extender for Charles, but also acts as a counter. Using it stabs behind you after a very short startup, which then grabs the opponent before sending them forward. You can use a forward dash after the move ends to continue comboing the opponent, and it is a full M1 reset, unlike a lot of other combo extenders in the game. Do keep in mind though, that the hitbox is behind you, so when you're using this move after 3 M1s, you want to flip your camera backwards and then use the move. Also, side dashing after the move and M1ing is not true, so if your forward dash is on cooldown when you land this, you really only have the options of trying to side dash M1 to keep the pressure, which can sometimes get you a combo, sometimes get you punished, and most of the time just result in them dashing away and going back to neutral, or use Sacrilege, which will usually hit for a little bit of constellation prize damage. This usually isn't a problem, since side dash M1s are used to combo start a lot more than forward dashes, and you can also just do slow M1s to help get your forward dash off cooldown. But it is important to keep in mind, because having that forward dash decides whether Shut Up gives you 3 M1s and a Despair, confirm, or gets you literally nothing. The stab is also blockable by the way, so don't get any funny ideas with that. Now, the interesting part of the move is that it also functions as a counter. If you get hit during the startup, then it just instantly stabs behind you and also negates you being hit, which can act as a very powerful combo starter, especially if you predict that someone is going to try to block bypass with a forward dash or side dash M1. Still, they do have to be behind you, so rather than it being like a normal counter, where if you get hit, you just automatically hit the opponent so long as they're in range, you have to pay attention where you're being hit by the opponent when you use this move as a counter. If you want to use this move in neutral, practice flicking your camera so that you can use it as a normal counter, and also learn how to read your opponent's block bypasses, because those are the perfect times where it'll be behind your back attacking you, where Shut Up can shine as a counter. Overall, it's mainly going to be used to extend your combo with a forward dash, but it has a niche usage in combo starting that it actually works with very well. Eye Catching might be my favorite move in the entire game. It's basically Gojo's Infinity from ABA, but if it didn't combo start. When you use it, you go into your block animation, and if you get hit by anything at all, whether that be a ranged or melee attack, you do a counter attack that ragdolls the opponent away. This counter attack is incredibly weak, damage-wise, doesn't ragdoll for very long, and while Sacrilege can land after it pretty consistently, it's not true. Not to mention, if you miss a counter, the end lag is extremely long, as in, longest in the entire game out of every move. You are guaranteed to be hit by the opponent if you miss your counter. So, doesn't this sound like trash? Not at all. The move only goes on cooldown if you miss a counter, or if you counter a ranged attack, meaning that as long as you keep landing your counter, you can spam it endlessly with literally no downtime. This lets you quite literally shut someone down and make it impossible for them to hit you so long as you keep reading them like a book, and it turns a lot of very dangerous or annoying moves, such as guard breaks like Mass Breaker or Curse Strikes Aerial, into a literal joke because you press the 3 key, and if they hit you with a silly unavoidable guard break, they just get countered. Well, not really with Curse Strikes Aerial, because any half-decent Yuji will just feint it, but you get the point. It is a tool that shuts down the opponent's offense if you're able to read it. Is your opponent really good at block bypassing? Eye-catching. Are they a Magneto spamming club dashes? Eye-catching. Are they addicted to Curse Strikes Aerial and yet don't know how to feint? Eye-catching. There are so many offensive options in the game that can't be dealt with by blocking, while simultaneously being hard, and at times impossible, to dodge, which makes certain characters ridiculously annoying to deal with, because unless you have a counter on hand, the move's guaranteed to land. Charles is a character who always has a counter on hand until he misses it. Now, in terms of advice with using the counter, it's not something I can cover in this video for time purposes, and generally depends more on your game sense and knowledge of other characters. There are obvious counters, like Toto's stupid unblockable dash grab or Magito's club dash, where the startup gives you ample time to react and counter. There are less obvious things, where you can generally tell that a Megumi will usually try to side dash block bypass you after they've used Rapid Escape. Finally, there are some things where it just kind of depends on how you've read your opponent's habits. Some people automatically start attacking after they get out of Ragdoll if the opponent is on top of them, because they want to take advantage of their awakening iframes, which you can sometimes counter. But there are also plenty of people who opt for dashing away after Wake Up instead, which, by the way, is something you can deal with Sacrilege if you read that properly. The move rewards you for having good reaction times, knowing the patterns ingrained in other characters, and also being able to read an opponent on the fly, so that you can understand when they'll attack you and when you can shut it down with your counter. However, it has a fitting punishment in an insanely long end lag that guarantees you get hit on miss, making the move very high risk with minimal but consistent reward. It's so fun to use, especially when you chain 5 counters back to back, and while I could gush more about the move, this section is getting too long, so I'll end it off with one final tip. Since the animation of the counter is the same as your block, you can bait opponents trying to bait your counter by blocking, letting go, standing still to give the impression that you just missed your counter, and then doing a counter when they're attacking you to try and punish. To be fair, this alone is really weak, and is never worth doing, because of the fact that landing your counter gets you barely anything, and eye-catching is designed, and should be used, more so as a defensive tool to get out of bad situations or avoid moves you can't normally avoid, rather than as a counter you actively try landing. However, faking a punish window can be very useful in other cases, especially with Charles' ult, which is a one-shot counter, and so you can use this to make landing his ultimate a lot easier. Love this move, but I've said enough. Sacrilege is his 4th move, and this thing is super solid, but also somewhat boring. It does a short startup before instantly dashing forward a short distance and grabbing the first person you hit in that dash. This dash bypasses block and deals somewhat low damage, while also knocking the opponent away and ragdolling them for a short bit of time. The move itself is hilariously easy to land, as is any guard break dash in the game like Mass Breaker, and all you have to do to land it, if you're actively aiming for it, is bait a dash and press your 4 key as long as you're in range. It's a lot more versatile than that though, and because the startup isn't that long, you can pretty reliably land it on somebody turtling. It does hit grounded, which lets you land it after despair or 4M1s, and free damage in neutral or in a combo is free damage. However, you cannot combo anything off of it other than marking someone with your R, so it's more so just a really easy move to land for some damage to annoy the opponent and kill whatever momentum they had going, then some kit defining tool that carries your damage output. Again, it's a very strong move because of how easy it is to land and just how absurd the hitbox and range are, but your damage comes from combos with Despair and Shut Up, not this. Finally, you have Charles' ult, Foresight. It's a one-shot counter with its own unique animation that only counters melee hits. The cutscene looks really cool, and is the only actual cutscene in JJS to my knowledge, but there isn't much to say about this move that I didn't already say about eye-catching. High risk, because if you miss, you lose all your ult and go back to scratch. Very high reward in that you straight up just instant kill whoever you landed on. It's a strong ult, but also one you want to reserve for when you know the opponent will hit you, and not when you think they're going to side dash block bypass you or whatever. In ranked matches specifically, there's a mental element to this ult, where the threat of getting one-shot can stop the opponent from playing at their best at a certain point in the match where they know you have your ult, forcing them to play a lot more carefully and defensively because they don't want to be hit by one shot. This can screw with their head horribly and make it a lot easier for you to hit them, so in a sense, you don't want to use your counter unless the opponent is at high health and you're sure that you can land it, because the threat of the counter can at times be stronger than the counter itself. It's a solid ult, all things considered, but it does get completely shut down by Sukuna as well, because of how it's a melee-only counter and Sukuna's M1s are ranged. Playstyle-wise, you can play Charles a lot of different ways, but unlike some other characters where the moves all synergize to amplify each other, like how each of Megumi's moves can combo with each other to make it harder for the opponent to deal with them than if they were standalone moves, Charles' moves feel a lot more independent. Rather than synergize to make his other moves better, his moves feel like they more so accomplish a different role each and respond to a different action from the opponent, covering the weaknesses of the other moves. Forward dash from the front, despair. Block bypass from behind, shut up. Some unavoidable move that you can't block or dodge, eye-catching. Opponent playing a little bit too passive and keeping their distance, Sacrilege. His playstyle focuses a lot more on reacting to the opponent's playstyle and countering it with his own moves, rather than some active aggressive, throw stuff at the opponent till they die style. It's the actual kind of passive play, where you punish the opponent's mistakes, not that stupid new definition of passive play that's taken off in recent years, which is just called running and being a sissy. Oh, and by the way, if you do that with Charles, you'll probably lose and you suck. Charles is cool, yada 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 yada, okay. Let's talk about how strong he is. In terms of how strong Charles is, it's kind of hard to evaluate him, but if I had to rank him, I'd put him at like an A+ tier. He's absolutely great, but his lower health pool does impact him a lot more than someone like Yuji, who's far less punishable, and the tool he has to increase his survivability can also shoot him in the foot if he misses it, unlike Yuji where that crushing blow feint will never really hurt him, or Megumi where the simple speed boost is tough to screw up with. The skill 4 with him is low, since you can get by through using it as an Ooga Booga old Hikari man, where you just spam 3M1s plus Shut Up, plus 3M1s plus Despair, plus Sacrilege, over and over again until whatever is in front of you dies. But the skill ceiling is incredibly high, with just how much all his moves benefit from properly reading the person you're fighting. He's genuinely my favorite character in the game, and almost feels like what Higuruma was trying to be. His read the opponent design actually works, and if you're someone like me who knows all of the characters in the game and how to read people because gaming addiction, then you can curb stomp people. Basically, C, maybe a B tier if you're bad at the game, you'd be better off using Grasshopper at that point, A+ tier if you're cracked at the game, because he can be absolutely insane with proper play, but the actual top tiers like Choso, with their one-shot shenanigans, are too good for Charles to reach S tier. Okay, so that's the end of the video. Man, this turned out a lot longer than I thought it would be, but I had a lot to say about Charles. He's probably going to be my new main, ditching Higuruma after I ditch Choso, after I ditch Hikari, after I ditch Megumi, after I ditch Yuji. Literally the only characters I've never mained in my entire time playing the game are Gojo, Mahito, Kogai, Yuki, and Todo, but he's a pretty good character all things considered. His design actually feels cohesive, like Z knew what he was trying to make beforehand, and while his moves aren't too crazy or special or out there, they do work together in a way that makes the kit feel overall special. The R special is also super cool, albeit way too gimmicky for my tastes, and honestly compared to Higuruma, Charles feels very well made. That's all I gotta say. Probably play Charles if you want to learn him, he's an easier character to learn than Yuki in my opinion, but any character where the difficulty lies in how you use your moves, aka the game sense type of skill curve, rather than some technical difficulty where you gotta learn some Devil May Cry combo or whatever, is a lot more enjoyable in my opinion. Main reason I like Charles way more than the last base only character, which is Yuki, though that's not to say I hated Yuki, just that they aren't my favorites. I'll make a video on Yuta as well if I have the time, but for now, this is the end of the video. Subscribe if you liked it, I'm going on vacation again, bye.